Hello, welcome to Jeremy's Retro Bar. I'm Jeremy and this is my Retro Bar. And this month is March, and that means it's Macintosh. And that means that a bunch of YouTubers and Twitter and Instagram are all getting together to do things related to the Mac. And you can just search hashtag Macintosh in YouTube or Twitter or Instagram or anywhere and find content related to this event. For my contribution, I am going to work on this Macintosh Plus. I've had this in my collection for probably around 20 years, maybe 18. And I noticed when I was trying to use it for another video that the image has gotten a little squished here. And in talking to people, everybody thinks it just needs a good recap. And it is old, and so I went ahead and picked up a recap kit from Console 5, and so I'm gonna go ahead and install the recap kit into the Macintosh Plus, and hopefully that will fix our squished image. And while we're at it, we've got this big bulky hard drive down here below, and I love the clean look of the Macintosh Plus, so why not replace that with a SCSI to SD? So it's all about upgrades for the Macintosh Plus this week, but of course first, we're gonna need to make ourselves a drink. As you can see, this week's a little bit different because we're in the kitchen and we're gonna be making a spiced rum punch. And the suggestion came from YouTube user CRG, who said, can you make something using spiced rum? So yes, we're gonna make a spiced rum punch, and it's supposed to be pretty strong. So first of all, we're gonna take a saucepan and we're just gonna put in 4 cinnamon sticks, a half a cup of water, and a half a cup of sugar. And we're gonna heat this until it boils. Okay, and now that that's boiling, we're gonna go ahead and turn off the heat, take it away. We're gonna let it steep for about 20 minutes, and then we're gonna let it cool completely before making the rest of the punch. While that's cooling, I'm gonna go ahead and take 1 lime here and slice it. And I'm gonna take 1 orange and slice it. All right, so 20 minutes have passed. I'm just gonna put everything into this pitcher here. So we're gonna go ahead and take our mixture here. I'm just gonna go ahead and pour that in. 2 cups of spiced rum. 1.5 cups of orange juice. And we'll do 1/2 cup lemon juice. And then we're just gonna put in our sliced orange and our sliced lime, and we'll stir all that together. And lastly, we'll just add some ice, and there we have a spiced rum punch. That recipe was a little bit of work, but we'll see how it turned out. Oh, that's great. That's perfect for spring. Yeah. Anyway, delicious. Cheers. Let's get recapping.
So using a long T15 screwdriver, I'm going to go ahead and remove the 4 normal case screws. And behind the battery door, we have 1/5 and last case screw. Because I'm dealing with a CRT and I don't want to die, I've gone ahead and clipped a screwdriver to the metal frame of the Mac Plus, and then I'm just going to go ahead and push it under this suction cup here, making contact with the contacts underneath and discharging the CRT. Now the scary part's done. This part always makes me nervous. I'm glad to be done with it. So now we can just unhook our analog board so that we can recap it. I'm going to start by removing the logic board. Then I'm going to remove all the screws that are holding the analog board in place. Which includes this ground wire that runs to the CRT frame. I think since it's been 30 years since this thing has been taken apart, this one power cable just would not budge. It just took a very long time to squeeze this thing out, but finally I got it out, and then I just need to remove this other cable. Then we've got our analog board free. And one last thing that we got to do before we start replacing capacitors is pushing these little plastic pins through to remove the paper backing on the other side of this circuit board. I'm no soldering expert, but I have this really nice desoldering gun, which makes this so much easier, and pretty much I'm just going to the legs of the through-hole capacitor, heating up the solder with the solder gun, pulling the trigger so it vacuums out the excess solder, and repeat. And I'm just gonna fast forward through this part as I desolder this entire analog circuit board. If anybody wants to share some great desoldering and soldering techniques, feel free to put it in the comments and share it with everybody else who watches this video. So while I'm desoldering all these capacitors, why don't we take a moment to learn a little bit more about the Macintosh Plus. The Macintosh Plus was released January 16th, 1986 for a retail price of $2,599, equivalent to $6,062 today. It was the third Macintosh released, and in many ways was the realization of what the original Macintosh should have been. It used the same Motorola 68000 CPU, the same phone-style keyboard connector, and the same external floppy connector as the previous Macs. But the Mac Plus doubled the ROM to 128K, doubled the floppy capacity to 800K, and doubled the RAM to 1 MB. The Mac Plus also boasted a lot of firsts for the Macintosh. It was the first with user-upgradable RAM and could be upgraded from 1 MB to 4 MB. It was also the first Mac that could be upgraded through the new SCSI port on the back, allowing for all sorts of SCSI devices to expand the capabilities of the Mac for years to come. Originally, the Mac Plus shipped in the same beige case as the Macs before it, but in January 1987, it transitioned to Apple's new platinum gray color that would define the Mac for the next decade. The Mac Plus would be the longest produced Mac ever, being on the market from January 1986 till October of 1990. Its record of over 4.5 years on the market would only be eclipsed by the second generation trash can style Mac Pro, which would remain unchanged for sale for 6 years. The Mac Plus was eventually replaced by the Macintosh Classic, which in many ways is just a Mac Plus in a sleeker case with an internal hard drive. The Mac Plus had a long life and in many ways was everything the original Mac wanted to be. PC World ranked it as number 4 in its top 25 PCs of all time, and of course it was famously used by Chief Engineer Montgomery Scott to make the formula for transparent aluminum. No other Mac has that sort of street cred. Alright, so let's get back to the recapping so we can see what this classic machine can do today. So as I removed the old capacitors, I went ahead and put the legs through the same holes so that I wouldn't lose track. So here I'm just going to go ahead and solder all those legs and then snip off the excess. And since this is going to take a long time, we'll go ahead and fast forward this process. Now that that's all soldered, we'll go ahead and snip these legs. Ah, check it out. A freshly recapped analog board. Now let's get this all put back together. And we'll start by putting our paper shielding back on. Then we'll put our board back here in the case. Then I'll start by connecting the wires. First up is going to be this ground wire that goes to the CRT frame. Then we'll connect our CRT power. And our little suction cup here. And of course we'll screw this back into the frame. And slot in our newly cleaned and dusted logic board. And because I'm impatient, I'm gonna go ahead and plug it in now and test to see that this thing even comes back on, because I would hate to put everything back together and then not have it work.
Not squished.
As you can hear, I'm very excited. Let's go ahead and get this thing put back together.
So I went ahead and got this recapped, and I did a quick test on the bench, but I'm gonna do a more extensive test here. So let's go ahead and turn our hard drive on here first. Wait for that to spin up. And once we've got that, we'll go ahead and turn on the Mac Plus, and hopefully everything functions. I know the screen was the full size that we wanted it to be. There it is. So that's awesome. And now I have a mouse plugged in so I can see if there's any distortion. It was getting smaller as it went to the top of the screen, getting larger as it went to the bottom of the screen. So far all the text looks correct. We're booting our OS good. And yeah, no distortion. Our mouse looks the same, top to bottom. So now that we know that the computer is working, we're gonna go ahead and set up the SCSI to SD. But yeah, let's get to a computer and get the SCSI to SD set up, and we can get started on this. So I've gone ahead and plugged in my SCSI to SD into the USB port on my laptop here. And I'm just gonna go to my applications folder and launch the SCSI to SD utility. And we can see down on the bottom, it says SCSI to SD ready, firmware version 4.8.4. So we're on the latest firmware, everything's good to go. So I'm just gonna set it up as a single device. I'm just gonna enable SCSI. I'm gonna do the auto for the card sector. 2 gigabytes I think is perfect for a Mac Plus. In fact, I think it's overkill. And I don't think I need to do extra devices for this. So then I'm just gonna say File, and I'm gonna say Save to Device. And it's gonna go ahead and program my SCSI to SD to my specifications. Close that. Cool. So that's it. And I'm gonna go ahead and quit and unplug my SCSI to SD. Well, like all things with retro computing, nothing ever goes as planned. The hard part is easy, the easy part is hard. I thought the recapping part of this video was gonna be the hardest part. That actually ended up being pretty straightforward. Even though I'm not the best at soldering, thought the SCSI to SD thing was gonna be the easiest, and it actually ended up being the hardest. And that is what I'm gonna talk about right now. So, the version 5.5 of the SCSI to SD is designed to just plug into the back 25-pin SCSI port on anything that has that port, really. And, you know, it's compatible with all the Macs and everything, and so everything I saw was that it's gonna work. Well, because the Mac Plus is the first Macintosh to implement SCSI, apparently it doesn't power it correctly. So in order for this to show up, you have to plug it in via the USB power, which is normally just used for firmware updates and things like that when you have it plugged into a computer. But in order for this to show up, we have to go ahead and plug this in to the Mac Plus. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that, and we're gonna power this up and get this configured. So just to make things easy, I mean, I have the discs and everything, but I'm gonna use a floppy EMU because I never trust the floppy drives in these, and I don't want it to wear the discs out. And so I just have this plugged into the back, and I took the casing off because the buttons get a little crazy with it. So anyway, that's what we're gonna use, and we're gonna go ahead and initialize this drive and get an OS installed. So power that on. And on the floppy EMU, I'm just gonna go down, and it's actually pre-configured with a lot of stuff, but I've got the patched HDSC utility already set up in a disk image here. So we'll go ahead and do that. So we'll select our disk image, and it's gonna go ahead and boot that. Excellent. So we're gonna go ahead to our disk, and I've got my patched utility right here, and it sees our device because it is powered, and I'm gonna initialize it, and disk initialization successfully completed. And we're gonna have a hard drive now that shows up on our desktop. And as far as a system, I'm thinking System 6 seems appropriate. And I'm gonna reboot into my system installer. I know I could copy the system files from this disk, but I like to do it kind of the proper, clean way. So we'll go ahead and shut it down. And on my floppy EMU, I'm just going to go back and select my system install disks. So we'll do a restart. How you guys doing? All right. So our system is up, and we've got a little installer, and I'm just gonna run the installer. Installation on Macintosh HD was successful. If you are finished, click quit. Excellent. Okay. I'm gonna restart. And we're gonna boot right up to our SCSI to SD device. Awesome. All right, now it's time to load some things into this. So I went ahead and loaded up the hard drive with some games, and we're just gonna test this guy out and see what we can get on a Macintosh Plus. So of course we're gonna start with Dark Castle, which I actually don't think I've ever played, but I know it's a classic game.
But first I'm going to make a quick detour over to the README file and learn how to play this game.
Okay. Nice. Oh no. Ooh, let's just try some Klondike. Nice. I like the sound. Ah, glider. We'll end with glider. That's right, okay. So I can get to there. Ooh. So that's it for our Macintosh Plus. Of course, recapping, if you want to learn more about that, I would definitely search YouTube. There are much better channels that are more instructional, that know proper soldering techniques. I just kind of fudge my way through it, and I probably don't do it correctly. So again, don't necessarily do it how I did it, but just don't be scared to do it, because recapping will revive these old machines. Things that I used to think were broken and irreparable now are pretty easily repairable using recap kits. And also, I will keep singing the praises of modern floppy emulators and SCSI to SD things, because it just makes it so much easier to get software onto these computers. I've had this Mac Plus for forever, and a lot of these games and software I just never had access to. You know, you usually had to find a in-between Mac and copy a disk image and get that one connected to the internet and try to get it onto a floppy, and then usually it was in the wrong format because this uses 800K floppies. And it was just a mess. And now with something like the floppy EMU, you just plug it in, load it up with your disk images, and it loads up onto the Mac Plus, and you just get access to all of that software. So again, retro computing, so much easier now than it was when I started. But anyway, that's my Macintosh video. I might be doing another one here this month, if I can squeeze it in. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and of course, thank you for watching. Thank you everybody for screwed up right at the end. Anyway, everybody, thank you for watching. Thank you very much for subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one.